This is the Go Fungal Podcast. AJ Miller is the Director of Marketing at Silgan Closures, a B2B packaging company that makes caps and closures to help protect the world's food supply. AJ, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
Yeah. So really quick, I guess you make caps and closures. You don't make the whole bottle and everything else. You make one part of it, right?
Correct. We make packaging for food and beverage products, and we make the closure, the piece that goes on top of the jar or the bottle for any beverages or sauces or things you might be buying in the grocery store.
And I feel like most people don't know that that's made by separate companies. I guess I always assumed it was always one thing.
Well, it's very different technology. You know, making a bottle or a jar, whether it's glass or plastic or aluminum, is a certain technology, use certain kind of blow molders or things like that. But when you make a closure, it's a completely different technology, and you have to design the closure to create a seal on that finish of the bottle. It's different types of engineering that you use, so it makes sense to come from different companies.
And it's all kinds of different types of closures, right?
Yeah, we are the only closure company worldwide that makes closures in every material type. So that means we've got steel closures, we've got plastic closures, we have aluminum closures, and we have a mix, which is called a composite closure. And so whether you're putting it on a salsa jar or an applesauce jar or a ready-to-drink tea or a sports drink, whatever it is in terms of food and beverage that you need a closure to seal it, for the most part, we can come up with something that can help you.
AJ, you and I, we kind of go back a little ways. We've worked together. We've partnered on projects and things like that. When I first met you and learned more about what Silgan does, I was kind of like blown away. It's such a niche thing, but it's like you really go deep, and you have people who are engineers and scientists and people who create this technology, and it's not just making caps in the backyard.
It's a good example is when you walk down any aisle in the grocery store, the chances are you can find our closures there.
Right. So you're a director of marketing. That's your role. You lead marketing at Silgan Closures. So I guess my first question is, what does a director of marketing do?
Okay. I'm the director of marketing for a business-to-business company. So we are marketing to other businesses rather than consumer products. And I feel our marketing department is a little unique because we report up to the VP of sales. So where sometimes in other companies, there's a little bit of a contention between sales and marketing. That doesn't exist here because we exist to support sales. The role of our marketing department is to make sure sales has what they need to go make the sale, whether it's getting people teed up to be talked to and bring them down the marketing funnel, or just all the different things that we're involved in. For example, we head up sustainability initiatives in our marketing department. We hold classes to teach people about closures and how to use them and how they function and how they're manufactured. We do a broad range of digital marketing. We do trade shows. So we have a lot of activities, a lot of strategies we engage in order to make sure sales has what they need to sell the product and support the customer.
So how do you know when you're being successful as a director of marketing in that role? Is it just more sales, or how do you measure that?
I measure our success by the projects that we complete. So as we get very organized to move down our activities for the year or the upcoming years, we write marketing plans. And marketing plans are the objectives and strategies and tactics that we want to engage in because we believe it's going to help the business. And so we show those marketing plans to our upper management. And if they agree that, yes, this is an excellent place for you guys to spend your time, then we'll start executing them. So as those projects, as those plans become complete and they become live and the things we're trying to do are successful, meaning that they've launched and we've seen a good response, that's heavily how I would measure success.
What do you love most about what you do?
I love project management. I came from my previous job was project management, where I would commercialize new products. And I just thought that was fascinating to have to pull everyone together and get everything organized. And I get to do the same thing here. So whether it's launching a new integrated campaign, whether it's doing a new Silgan University, or whatever the project is, I like getting it organized and trying new things. You know, we're currently looking at implementing HubSpot, which is a new platform for marketing automation and CRM. And so it's something brand new. So it's fun to dive into those and organize it and execute it. So that's what I really like.
So yeah, I guess how did you get to where you're at now? Were you always in marketing? Kind of how'd you get here?
Yeah, I've always been in marketing ever since I got out of college. And I've always been in the consumer products world. The reason I was hired here at Silgan Closures is because they wanted someone who knew how to speak to the marketers at a consumer products company.
Mm,
Because all of our accounts are consumer products companies. So they wanted someone who could speak that language and kind of feel out what was needed. And so
right.
that's the role I've been playing. So as an example of that is we had one account that wasn't sharing their new product launches with us, with our sales force. And so they invited me to come along and meet with this account. And what I did was I took them some market research that I'd gathered on new beverage launches and new flavors and what was going on around the world, and just held a discussion with their marketing team about, we're seeing this in consumer feedback. What are you seeing? What are you thinking about it? Do you agree with it? What are you doing about it? And by the end of the meeting, they laid out all their product launches for the next 2 years, and we were able to supply closures for them. So it was just a way of approaching things of having a background in consumer product marketing.
Right. As the sales team was the sales team were just like, how do you do that?
Yeah, and it was fun because the sales team didn't know if we were a company where it made sense to bring in market research to a major consumer brand. It was like, well, who are we to provide them with market research? And it's like, well, it's a discussion. Let's kind of look at what we found and see if they agree and understand how they're thinking about it.
Yeah. So there's got to be a big difference going from a consumer company to a B2B company. Do you miss it at all?
I don't. I actually really like being in B2B. My background has given me what I need to really perform well here. And it was kind of weird coming here at first because it isn't as hectic. But I was talking to some of my colleagues from my previous job, and I said, it's kind of weird because, I'm going home at 5 o'clock, which is unusual. I'm not working on weekends. And they said, well, here's what's going on. If you can imagine being in World War II, you just got pulled off the front lines in Europe and plopped in a desk job stateside. And that's what you're dealing with. But now that I am learning all the things that we could be doing, we've got full plates and we're moving it forward.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the flip side of it, right? It's like in a consumer brand, a lot of times there's already so much momentum and so much stuff going on. Just keeping up with it as a marketer is probably the challenge. But here, you just have all these opportunities. It's really up kind of yours to create, a little bit different than the push pull of it's a little bit different.
Exactly. And I happen to be very fortunate to have a boss in the VP of sales that is extremely supportive. So if I take him a project and say, I think this will really help things out, he's always willing to let us run with it and figure out if we can do something good with it. So it's very nice.
Those are the good things. So what's the bad things? What do you love least?
We have a 3-person marketing team here, and we tend to do a lot ourselves, excluding creative and things like video production or website production. But when we try to do public relations and get articles written, we struggle with lack of resources. And even with digital media and digital marketing, it frustrates me that I'm not sure we're doing as good a job as we can. And I always am looking for ways that the 3 of us can be more efficient. I look at what our competitors are doing and what our sister companies are doing, and I want to stay on the edge of that.
Yeah, and what are you seeing out there, out in the world, like on social and other places? What are those things you're seeing? Like, we got to do more of this.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that's really top of mind now and what we're working hard on is sustainability.
Right.
The marketing department was just fascinated with sustainability and all that can be done there with all the ESG categories, the environment, the social, and the governance. There's so much to learn. A few years ago, we would say, oh, we put LED lights in our plant, we're sustainable. And now we realize just how minuscule a thing that was.
Right.
And all of the things that we need to get involved in, like renewable energy and calculating all of our carbon emissions all the way through scopes 1, 2, and 3. And I'm really proud of what we're doing, but it's something where we could always use help to do it better. A number of our accounts would like us to participate in EcoVadis, which is a group that will help validate your environmental data and your environmental numbers. And that's something we would like to cater to our accounts for, but we don't know how we're going to get it done right now. We've got so much that we're working on in sustainability. It's how we're going to include that on our plate. So things like that is having the resources to get all the things done that we'd love to tackle.
It seems to always be the It's like you have this idea of what you want the impact to be, and then you have these challenges with resources and constraints and time and budget or whatever. As a leader of a small team, what are the ways that you approach that challenge with like just lack of resources?
We move forward with projects that we think will benefit the company, that management has proved and they agree will benefit the company. And then we divide it up among the team as to what they want to work on. So in terms of having a team that's motivated and they want to drive this stuff forward, the team members, as we put together the marketing plans, they have input into what they think would be great to do. And then they get to decide what role they want to play on most of those objectives. So if we have someone who's really passionate about trade shows, they can run with that. And then you get the workload that you're not expecting. You plan to do these strategies, but then all of a sudden, for example, in the last few years, hiring at our facilities, we have 11 facilities with Silgan Closures, and we need more people to work at our plants. And so one of the marketing employees was just passionate about it. She thought it would be really fun to go out and help with recruiting at all the different plants. And so we put a project together on how she could assist and make sure the plants were okay with us assisting and make sure they would welcome what we could offer. And it was something that she liked to do. She called it the Dream Project, and she drove it forward. So in terms of getting everything done, we focus on what we've told management we're going to do, and then we continue to do other things that make sense that they're passionate about. So you've got that type A personality drive to get things done when it's stuff you enjoy doing.
It's like the sort of the three-legged stool, right? It's like there's got to be a need. You have to have the ability to do it or the skill to do it, and then you have to be passionate about it. It seems like those are the three legs to the stool. With a small team, it's not always easy to have all of those things in place. What do you do when you don't have when somebody's passionate but they haven't done it before, for example?
I let them try it, and I even attempt to keep my hands off as they're trying something new. This is actually something I learned in the scouting universe. I'm a scout leader. My kids are in the scout organization. And when you're doing that, you let the kids fail because they learn from it. So for example, if you're in scouts and you're going on a hike and one kid's got a map and a compass and you are aware that they just made a wrong turn and they're going down the wrong path, you let them do it. You'll even follow them for a couple miles if you need to until they figure it out. And eventually they will, and they'll be nervous, they'll be scared, they're like, what did I do? And you just kind of walk them through it and help them understand where they are in the map and where they need to go. But then in the end, they know what mistake they made, they learned from it, and they're able to teach others how to do the same thing. So I try to implement that here at work. 80-90% of a manager's job is to assist getting rid of roadblocks from the people that work with you, just to make sure they have the resources to do their job. I've got a live project right now. One of the people that work with me is driving it, and I have opinions about it. I'd like to alter things, but I want to let them have the experience of taking this all the way to the end. So I'm trying to stay back and let them drive it. And they're making decisions that aren't always the decisions I would make, but in the end, they easily could be better than the ones I made. We just gotta kind of wait and see how it turns out.
There was an analogy that somebody shared with me one time that's like, let people take the car out and it's okay if they kind of ding it up and come back, and it's as long as it's not totaled.
Yeah. As long as everyone's safe.
And everybody, comes home in one piece. That's the most important thing. How do you set priorities with a small team? Obviously you're still the leader of that team and they have to know where to focus. How do you decide what to focus on?
Sure. I sit down with the team members individually once a week, and our meetings tend to take place on Monday. I'll sit down with each team member for an hour and we go over a list that they keep of their activities that they're working on. And we kind of review, and the questions that I ask, are what are you struggling with? Where do you need help? What is there someone you need to get support from to get this done? And then I can help pave those paths. But I also ask that they prioritize their activities based on, on the list. The one at the top is the one that's the highest priority. But then if I see the priorities aren't aligned with what we need to focus on, we can readjust that. I kind of let them prioritize their tasks, but I'll give assistance as we move along. And
I always liked watching you with your team, how you give people space to work through these problems on their own, and then how you communicate about that. But that really is a long-term approach, right? Because if you're just sitting there telling people what to do all day long, it's really going to always just be that, right?
Yeah.
Kind of limiting to growth,
Yeah.
so to speak.
I've got some strong independent employees, if you will, type A personalities that are driven. If you put parameters on them and you tell them how they're to do things, they won't be here anymore. They'll move
Right.
on by letting them grow in their position, which is not always easy, but it's beneficial for everyone.
I know I learned a lot being around you guys, and
Good.
I love that. You know, you mentioned you only have so many people, a small team. You have to work with other vendors. You know, Fungi is an example of that, and you have others that you work with to get all the work done. What are three things that you look for in a good partnership with a vendor when you're looking for that help?
One thing that I look for is creativity. Someone who can bring more creativity to our activities than we have ourselves. You know, an outside perspective that can make it robust and add to it. And it's really important to me is a vendor that can set expectations with us.
Like a lack of clarity of what was said versus what actually is being delivered.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just the constant of setting expectations is good. It's kind of like a relationship of any type. If you have that communication, you can work it out.
There's unexpected things that pop up along the way of a project that can be a challenge. We learn something we didn't know until we didn't know it until halfway through.
Exactly.
I think what you said about like that second thing being what are they telling us and what are we actually getting? That sometimes can be an ongoing conversation where we're managing expectations along the way.
And then the flexibility that goes with that. This is a unique position we're in because even though I mentioned deadlines earlier, we tend not to have really strict deadlines. The projects that we do, we work on, and when they launch, they launch. So that communication needs to be there as well, because I would think an agency or a vendor would get frustrated when everything's not organized and defined as they could be with deadlines. But then again, the flexibility, I think, would be a benefit as well. So it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, I think you're right. That the flexibility along the way is important, especially when it's a larger project that's split up into sort of chapters, so to speak.
You can't over communicate.
Right.
You know, I mean, if I get an email every day that says, here's the status, that might be overkill, but it's not going to hurt anything.
You can at least tell somebody to stop.
Exactly.
You know, it reminds me of when I used to work at Chili's. It was a big deal to keep everybody's drinks filled.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I walked up to this table and I filled this guy's iced tea. And he was like halfway full. I was like, yeah, it's a good time to do it. Not a lot of tables. And then I noticed it was like halfway full and I stopped by and I filled it up again. I stopped by, I filled it up again. And he pulled me aside and he was like on a date. He's like, sir, I just want you to know that you're doing an excellent job filling up my iced tea. That was a learning moment, you know? Over communicate is better than under communicate.
Yeah. It's a thing where you kind of need to learn the communication, right? And we need to lay out expectations as well. What are we looking for? And, you know, creative briefs and actually creative briefs are an area that I kind of struggle with. I completely believe in creative briefs.
Right.
Because when you write a creative brief, you're telling your agency or your vendor exactly what you want and giving them what they need. I also take it to management and say, we're going to start a project and we're going to start spending money on whether it's a video, whatever we're doing. So you guys need to actually look at this, because if you want to make corrections, now's the time. Because if you make corrections down the road, it's going to cost us money. So take a serious look and give us any feedback. But then at the end of the creative brief, when you get the creative back, if they don't like it, you got to go to them and say, hey, you approved this brief. What about the creative does not align with the brief? You know, if upper management doesn't like something, you're going to change it. But
sure,
but you can have a lot of ground by saying you approve the brief and this creative matches the brief. So maybe your concerns aren't quite as detrimental as you might think they are. But where I struggle with briefs is how much direction do you give? David Ogilvy says, you know, give me the freedom of a tight brief. So how tight do you want it? And as a marketing person that provides direction and project management, I'm not the creative person. So I should not be really telling people how to do the creative. That's their job. Yeah. And so I try to be careful not to step on a vendor's toes by giving them too much direction. But then if I kind of know where I want to end up, I figure I should share that, right? I struggle with that balance of giving the vendor the freedom that they are the creative people. That's why they've been hired. Yet giving them too much or too little direction in order to accomplish what in my head I want to get done.
Yeah, that is oftentimes a place of pain for people, where sometimes you just don't have all the answers at the beginning. You know that you need to move the needle on something, a project or a campaign, or you need to promote something, but you don't exactly know all the information you need, but you have to start somewhere. I always think of the creative brief as like the what and the why, and then the partner that comes back with the how. All right, switching gears here. What's something about you that most colleagues wouldn't know, might find surprising, interesting, or unique?
I guarantee no one knows this until now.
Yes.
Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved the taste of Pepto-Bismol. And
Wow.
I feel that maybe as an adult, we should start using Pepto-Bismol in more ingredients, like a Pepto margarita. Or, where can you take that other people might actually like it? Or is this just going to be something I like myself?
I don't hate it. If I ever had to take it, I'm never like super bummed out about it. The Pepto-Bismol people did a pretty good job with the flavors.
If you read the bottle, I thought I would get some indication of what that was, but all it says is flavor. They won't give you any more indication than that.
I don't want to know, I don't want to know where it came from. All right, what's a word or phrase that we should stop using in the workplace?
It drives me crazy when people say "my bad," because it's like a casual way to say I was wrong. So it's good that you take ownership and that you were wrong, but it's like you're not sincere about it. It's like you're saying, "Oh, my bad, I screwed up, and I don't really care." That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah,
so that always drives me nuts when people say that.
Note to self. All right, good. All right, finish this sentence, and if you want to do it in an old-timey voice, you can. If you don't, that's okay too. Finish this sentence. You know what really grinds my gears?
You know what really grinds my gears is when you've got people within your company that aren't as driven as you and your team may be. It feels lackluster. It feels like they're just doing what they can to get by, and I feel like that's a missing cylinder in the engine. I like it when people at least show like they're making an effort, or at least show that they care.
At least pretend.
Yeah.
All right. Book, podcast, or article that we got to check out ASAP, and why?
I recently read a book this year. It's a new book that was just published. It's called Saving Us by Katherine Hayhoe.
Okay.
She's a climate scientist. And
Okay.
so she has this book, and she talks about how to talk to people about climate change. And then she talks about her experience as a climate scientist, the things that she has learned. So it's not hearsay, it's actually her personal experience. And then the last section of the book, she talks about what you and I, what an individual can do to be effective in climate change. And it was really an interesting book, because I am not an overly passionate person about climate change, but this one was so well written, I tore through it quite quickly. And I really liked what she had to say about it. It was very useful. And as a marketer who needs to communicate about sustainability and climate change, it really gave me some insights on how that can take place.
Awesome. Do you think it'd be helpful for other marketers who are focused on ESG and sustainability? And
Absolutely. I got my team members are reading it right now.
Oh, nice.
By choice. It was just a recommendation. But they've had the same feedback, because the whole first section of the book, the author talks about how there's different opinions of climate change and how it's political, and it doesn't need to be political. She talks about how you talk to people. She would go into presentations where she needed to talk about climate change, and she had a hostile audience, and she had tactics and methodologies and ways to present the context or the content so that it was well received. And I thought it was really interesting. It's great for anybody who's communicating.
I like that.
Yeah.
We'll check that out. Well, AJ, thank you so much for joining me for a little convo here and talking to me on the podcast. How do people know if they have a Silgan cap or closure on their bottle? Where can they check? Do they know if they have your product?
If it's a metal closure, if it's
Okay.
a steel or a aluminum closure, you can look on the very side, and there's a little Silgan S that sits there.
All right.
And if you have a plastic closure, if you turn it upside down and look among the threads or look at the panel at the bottom of the closure, you can see the Silgan logo in there as well.
All right. So check next time that you're drinking something. Awesome. Well, AJ, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thank you.
fungal.